This is Newsfeed PM, the late edition. I'm Hugo de Batika. Thank you for staying with us. Now, the South African Federation of Trade Unions is calling for the extension of the 350 Rand COVID-19 social relief of distress grant. This as a grant is set to expire today. The union says the end of government special COVID-19 grant will plunge marginalised and unemployed people even further into poverty. SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzi Mavavi joins us to talk about this. Ms. Mavavi, very good evening and thank you for speaking to us. I suppose the first thing is to give us a background into how this grant came about and obviously its impact.
Well, when the country was put on level 4 and 5 last year already, the government recognized that in the context where workers in their millions were being asked to stay at home, in a context where workers were losing their job, left, right, and center, and that a country already in a crisis, an economy already in a recession, would lead to a situation where its citizens are thrown even deeper into levels of poverty. And so government introduced a range of measures. It introduced TERS, which was money that was given to companies, as well as to the workers, such that during that lockdown period, the workers will still receive their salaries from both the TERS and the UIF. Government introduced these special grants to cover the unemployed and to cover or to rather even increase a little bit the old age pension, the support for people who have disabilities, people who are supporting children. And so these were measures that were meant to cushion us from the worst effects of that lockdown. All of us saw this beginning to have some small impact. I mean, look, from the SAFTU point of view, we always said a 350 rands a month is absolutely tokenist and does not even begin to address the levels of poverty in this economy. But still, a 350 rands to somebody who have no income whatsoever is something. Look, it at least it can give you a loaf of bread for a few days. It can make you to afford a bottle of paraffin, and it can make you to buy a candle, or at least for to travel to town and search for employment opportunity or even visit families. And when you remove TERS money, when you take away all of those special grants on pensioners, on people supporting children, people with disabilities, and when you actually at the same time taking the country into adjusted level 3 of a lockdown, you are basically saying in a context where restaurants are literally on their knees bleeding to death, where the hotel sector, where the entire tourism sector is gasping for air, you're saying to those workers, including those that have lost their jobs in their millions last year, look here, you black men, you are on your own. We will not support you any further. And we think that we have other priorities. And so you must see to finish as to how you deal with your unemployment. We even removing the 350 rands social grants. We think that that's just so cruel. And that's so terrible statement to make at this moment, when the levels of poverty have climbed tremendously and make South Africa even worse with inequalities and unemployment. And that's why we in SAFTU are joining 860 other civil society organizations who are making a call on the president to continue and extend the payment of these SRD grants to at least the end of the financial year, which is around March, increase it to at least 585 rands per person per month, which will be at least the same level of the food poverty line in our country. Secondly, we're calling for the unduly harsh and narrow criteria for accessing the grants to be relaxed a little bit. The purpose, we must make it clear. We want more and more people who need these grants to benefit from them. The narrowing of the criteria makes this whole scheme to exclude millions more people that would have been legitimate to receive such a grant. We're calling for the inclusion of the caregivers for the SRD grant, regardless whether they are receiving a child support grant on behalf of their children. And more importantly, we are calling for the speedy introduction of the basic income grant, a call that the civil society and the working class formations have been making in this country since the Taylor Report of 2002. There's no need for debate. Everybody knows that we are a very rich country, unfortunately, two countries in one. One country absolutely poor and devastated by unemployment, poverty, and the other country small but super rich and living in absolute opulence at the expense of the greater majority. So we're asking the government to introduce a basic income grant instead of considering taxes against the poor on the 24th of February. We're asking government from SAFTU to introduce a wealth tax, introduce a solidarity tax, take steps to stop the pillaging of the government procurement budget, which the government officials are saying between 35 and 40% of it gets stolen by the corporate sector in our country. We're asking the government to ensure that it raises the tax on the rich, and the corporates used to pay up to 52% of taxes during the apartheid era. Those corporate taxes are now down to 28%.
Mr. Vavi, if I could just stop you there, sir. A couple of questions I'd obviously like to ask. The first is, government has said it has no money several times, and you're suggesting that they increase the grant to 585 Rand. Where will they get the money from if they are broke? And then the second issue is, you've suggested the solidarity and wealth taxes. In your projections, how much would this bring into Treasury?
The government have no money out of a policy choice, not because South Africa is a poor country. If you look at the IMF report as late as in 2018, which does a study on the wealth of the country, its mineral resources, its land usage, its products that it produces out of the land. We are rated as the fifth most, or one of the, let's say, the fifth richest country in the whole world when you look at that measure. The problem with ourselves is that we were intimidated, and let's face it, our state was captured even before 1994 when it agreed not to implement the most important, radical, progressive demands of the Freedom Charter, such as the demand that the wealth of the country must be shared and that the mineral wealth beneath the soil must be shared, must be handed over to the people as a whole. When we locked ourselves to neoliberalism, i.e. that our focus and the focus of the government is going to be limited on creating better conditions for corporates to maximize their profit, even at the expense of workers through their super exploitation. We should have known that we are driving our country into an underdevelopment when it was already inheriting a huge deficiencies of development from colonial and apartheid era. When we decided to agree on formulas that are penned for us by the rating agencies and the IMF, such as that our GDP debt ratio will be put at a particular percentage of 60-70%, when all other countries in their development stage had their debt to GDP ratio way above that, up to today, into 90s, 100% or even more. In fact, during the era of apartheid, in a period when South Africa grew its economy faster, industrialized faster, created state-owned enterprises left, right, and center, its GDP debt ratio was at around 130%. Between 1932 up to around 10 years or so after that, South Africa saw its longest and most robust growth. So when you talk about the debt, it depends on the nature of the debt. Are you going to have to go out, borrow money, or use taxes to feed into consumption and corruption? Or are you going to be using that money to industrialize, build infrastructure, and create jobs that are sustainable? It is a choice that we are always being told that we are poor and that we have no money. If we had the government with a backbone, we would have stopped illicit cash outflows that amount to 400 billion rands annually. And the reason why we are not taking steps to do so is because our political leadership are implicated, we want to argue. And that's why they will never take steps against those that are moving money into the safe havens, because they are the beneficiaries through holding shares in those companies. So we're asking for boldness on the part of the government at this stage. We're calling on the government to once in its life act in the best interest of the poor and the marginalized majority of the working class and the black people, and make sure that those who can afford a little bit of more tax and can pay more tax, please don't even consider increasing the VAT, because we know that the VAT as a regressive tax system is going to punish even more the unemployed, who in proportion pay more VAT than the rich in our country.
Mr. Vavi, thank you so much for speaking to us. Quite insightful. And that was SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi.